Constitution Act establishes the basic elements of New Zealand's government. Now they are the sovereign, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Those four. Now the Act also provides that Parliament has the power to make laws. Parliament has the power to make laws. What the Constitution Act gave New Zealand was essentially legislative independence. Legislative independence. Now what do we mean by this? By legislative independence, we mean simply the authority to make law. So let's understand the situation. What we have essentially is New Zealand as a British colony. New Zealand is a British colony, right? 1840. Britain has lawmaking authority over New Zealand because Britain is the colonial power. Britain is the empire. New Zealand, Aotearoa, is a colony of Britain. Britain has lawmaking power. This persists until 1947, the Statute of Westminster Adoption Act, where there is an attempt to sever the ties, to eliminate the lawmaking authority of Britain as it pertains to New Zealand. Now this was done almost entirely. But Britain retained, with New Zealand's consent, residual power over lawmaking. And with the Constitution Act 1986, then New Zealand eliminated Britain's residual power, residual lawmaking power. What the Constitution Act establishes is that New Zealand is a constitutional monarchy. A constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system of government. We essentially have a triangular relationship when it comes to government in New Zealand. So, we have Parliament, which is the legislative branch. We have the Cabinet, which is the executive branch. And we have the judiciary, so the courts. The courts is the judicial branch. Overriding all of this is the sovereign. This is the Queen. And in New Zealand, via her representative, the Governor-General. In practice, once again, this is a purely ceremonial role. This is a purely ceremonial status. The executive, the cabinet, executes the law as it's decided by Parliament. And then we have the courts. And what the courts do is resolve any disputes that we happen to have over the law. So Parliament makes the laws, Cabinet executes the laws, there are disputes pertaining to the law, and those disputes go before the courts. So, when we think of the executive, what is the executive? What is a clear member of the executive? The first one.
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, precisely. What Parliament does is appoint an executive body of ministers. And this executive body has the duty of executing Parliament's will. So when you think of Minister of Justice, you're thinking executive. When you're thinking of Minister of Trade, Minister of Immigration, Minister of Internal Affairs, and the list goes on, we're thinking the executive. When you're thinking of electorates and the representatives of each electorate, when you're thinking of list MPs, you're thinking of Parliament. When we are talking about High Court judges, Appellate Court judges, Supreme Court justices, we're referring to the judiciary. Now, what is the idea behind this separation?
So all the control is not concentrated with one person and it's divvied up to make it more fair?
Precisely. We do not want all power to vest with one individual or one body. Why not?
But if one branch starts to do things that are maybe ethically questionable or that the general population doesn't agree with there'll be something that's independent that can try and put a check on whatever they're doing.
Precisely. Key word in that answer, check. Checks and balances. And so what we've decided in New Zealand is that vesting that much power in any one individual or one body is a recipe for corruption, is a recipe for oppression, is a recipe for totalitarianism. So instead, we divvy it up, and then we have these checks and balances.
Is there any reason to believe how there could be some kind of tyranny with them working in conjunction with each other? Like the institutional structures, they can follow the same vested interests.
So, that's an excellent question. The separation of powers that we have here is not absolute. Who decides the cabinet? Parliament. So Parliament decides who the members of the cabinet are. And who decides who the judges are going to be?
Cabinet.
Cabinet, precisely. There is overlap between these bodies. So a member of Parliament can also be a member of the executive.
Such as Prime Minister.
Exactly.
Well, all members of the executive are members of Parliament. And then what you have is the cabinet who's deciding who the judges are going to be. So what happened if person X in here decides that his old mate from law school should be the next judge? So here's where we have to say that there is not a complete separation of powers. The only place where there is a complete separation is between the public, which unfortunately is often written down here. But if you think about it, the public should in fact be up here. Because at the end of the day, Parliament only has authority because there's a public behind it that supports it. So, when it comes to elections, we have to understand that there are two systems that are common to parliamentary forms of government. There are two systems. Why do first-past-the-post systems lend themselves to two parties?
Because people realize that if they vote for a minor party, it's probably going to be wasted, and so they invest their vote in one of the two major parties.
Precisely. In a first-past-the-post system, what you have are two dominant parties. Two dominant parties. Why we moved away from the first-past-the-post system is because in the end, a large number of people are left unrepresented. So we switched and we brought in an MMP system. In an MMP system, you have two votes. One vote is for your representative in your electorate, and the other vote is what we refer to as a party vote. A party vote. If you achieve greater than 5% of party votes, then you will receive a number of seats that is proportionate to the percentage of votes you've acquired. What is the purpose of this? Why did we move to an MMP system?
The little guy gets a say.
Okay, so even the little guy gets a say. Others?
More representation of the wishes of the public.
Okay, more representative. How? How is this system more representative than a first-past-the-post? Right, you end up having more than two parties. You can actually vote for the candidate of your choosing and vote for the party of your choosing. And in the end, if the party you've chosen achieves a minimum threshold, we've decided is 5%, then that party will also have seats. Within an MMP system, how does a party form government if they do not acquire a majority of seats? So let's use New Zealand's example. National does not have a full majority, but they want a majority so that they can govern. So what do they do to acquire that majority? Coalitions, precisely. So what National does is turn to other parties who have seats. So we turn to ACT, we turn to Maori Party, and we say, hey, listen, form a coalition with us. For more explanations on this, please see Parliament's website. There's an election website, there's a parliamentary website. You can take a look at those. It provides greater explanation.